Per people here who have dated rich people, what did you learn? How was the contrast? She was a full-time professional fine artist, oil painter. Dad was a pioneer in green energy. Whole family is loaded as a result. She was able to focus on school, earn her MFA, travel the world on residencies, etc. She was wonderful, and goes to show you that when you have a well-adjusted upbringing, support, and the money to provide resources, you can be who you were born to be. Absolutely could not relate to the socioeconomic struggles of the people she dated though. I've noticed a disproportionate number of successful artists come from very wealthy families. You need a lot of money to sustain not making money for years. Not just that, it helps if your parents own a gallery or have friends who do. They're not making it organically. I grew up very blue-collar poor. The men I knew fixed cars, re-roofed their own houses, knew plumbing and electrical stuff, etc. My husband grew up very wealthy. His family had a massive house, a pool, a vacation home in Spain, and maids. Honestly, the contrast was stark. The first thing he did after we moved in together was put liquid dish soap in the dishwasher. He didn't know anything. He didn't know the vacuum needed to be emptied. It could have been a deal breaker, but he fully embraced his ignorance and learned. It was a whole new world and he loved it. One of my favorite memories is of putting up our first Christmas tree. He'd never been part of that and got so much joy from it. I hear you. We got invited to spend a weekend at a mountain vacation home of some wealthy friends. The wealthy husband and I went out to get wood for the fireplace. There were rounds cut, but they weren't split. He admitted to me that he didn't know how to split wood. I showed him how to grab the splitting maul with gusto, put his entire body into swinging it all the way around, and hit the round with a ring the bell at the fair force that sent the halves of the round flying to either side in fear. His ear-to-ear grin as he split wood was priceless. Splitting wood is like great therapy. Never knew. She worked a normal job, lived in a normal apartment. It wasn't until someone told me after we broke up, she moved for work, that I found out her family was minted. Maybe she wasn't close with them? I think it's admirable that she was living normally despite having a rich family. It's a good way to not lose touch with reality. No, met her parents once. Dad drove a normal car, no designer clothes, just seemed like normal people. When I say they are with money, it isn't just a few million. Bumped into her years and years later as our daughters ended up going to the same school. I still didn't understand how rich until my daughter mentioned the private jets. Had a girlfriend in high school. We dated until sophomore year of college. What baffled me wasn't her disregard for the cost of things, but the fact that she couldn't understand why I couldn't just pick up and take her out for nice dinners, or buy her $400 Louis Vuitton sneakers she wanted for Christmas, especially since she was willing to buy me $250 Jordans. I declined. She was such a sweet girl but had no concept of other people coming from poor families. No idea how I had no money despite being 16, 17 and not having a job. When I got my first minimum wage job at 18, I spent pretty much everything I had on her for several years. She also took me out and bought me nice gifts, but she never had a job. She had a $300 a week allowance from her dad, but would ask him for money whenever she wanted anything, so she wouldn't spend her own allowance on anything. She had like $9,000 in her bank account by the time we were 18, and I had $200 to my name most of the time. LOL. Very nice girl. Gorgeous. She was very good to me, but I eventually lost interest because of reasons that had nothing to do with money. If she had no concept that poor people exist, that's on her parents, both environmentally and genetically. I don't disagree. They were also lovely people. They just came from absolute dirt poverty in the Philippines. So when they came here and figured it out, they just wanted their kids to have it all. And they did. I wouldn't call them idiots or anything for not exposing her to poverty. Dated the daughter of a wealthy member of parliament for my country's Conservative Party. During diner discussions at their home, it really hammered it home how little her mother, the MP, understood about the daily reality of being poor. This is what confuses me when people vote for rich people into government and say, if they can run a business, they can run a country. Why the hell would you vote for someone who would never understand your daily struggles? The family was an entity in itself and had rules. Relationships are everything. The family itself is a thing: the club, the parties, the vacations, the homes, the cars, the business. It's all about the family. The patriarch, the traditions, the schools, the business partners, and the neighborhood, and the club. It's not a bad thing, it's just different. I was raised to be independent and get the fuck out of my parents' house. They stick together like glue. Everyone has a role to play, but they have security, and they belong. I never belonged anywhere. I was raised by people who had kids because that's what you were supposed to do. And then I got the fuck out of their house when I turned 18, and that was that. My best friend married into a family like this. The weird thing to me is how everything is shared. They share cars, homes, planes, boats, etc. Everything is the family's. They also get along weirdly well. Everyone is best friends with everyone else. It's funny, not comically though, that sharing in family is weird. Sharing in general I definitely don't think is weird, it's the extent of it. For example, you might randomly notice one of the cars in your garage is gone because someone else stopped by and borrowed it. She has a massive house and it's used as the party house for the rest of the family. So like if someone is throwing a bachelorette party, a company Christmas party, or anything else, it's always held at their house. Same thing with jewelry like watches. It's not uncommon at all just to stop by someone's house and take something from it. My ex was a pur sod, but his family, I got to know, was buttered. I also got to know he was basically leeching off them, which led to the strange arrangement of him not earning nearly as much money as he expected of anyone else like me. He would constantly talk shit about the way I lived an ordinary life. My furniture was shit, my clothes were cheap, and my gifts were never good enough. How did I not buy my food at the gourmet store anyway? According to him, I didn't know how to cook either. Because how could you make real Italian pasta without the real Italian recipe? Recipes that his parents brought from all of their luxury travels all over the world, and none that came from him. His cooking shit was made even more hilarious by the fact this dude couldn't cook even a simple dish on his own. But his brother was a chef, so whenever he needed instructions, which was always, he would call his brother. I left him soon because his attitude was utterly insufferable. What I learned is that it's okay if you're rich. You're still dateable as long as you're not an asshat. I wouldn't say I was poor, more average. But the two wealthy women I dated were both quite spoiled. They expected to get their way, and what was interesting for me was that they both expected their money to open doors and solve problems, rather than using courtesy or charm. My ex-best friend was the same. What was very noticeable for her especially was the smallest thing was a crisis. People who have never dealt with true pain or loss because they've always been shielded from it are upset by small things. Yeah, I'd say the worst and most tiring thing about my ex was she would let the meaningless things ruin her, our day. It's like her threshold for life was shifted. Her expectations would never be met, and everything would become more miserable as a result. Beside her, I know a couple of really rich people, and I gotta say, not one of them is a well-balanced person. In every single case, their upbringing and their parents are the main reason for it. That in majority of the cases all is fine until you met the family and friends. You sit there like an idiot, unable to relate to anything what they say, and once you think some familiar topic appears, it ends up with a discussion about 10K baby strollers, wines, or childhood memories about skiing in Switzerland or taking a trip to a seaside with their first Porsche. Their friends' interests were mostly things outside my tax brackets. Couldn't even relate to typical girly discussions about makeup and clothing because their talks were about picking Birkin over Chanel, not about cute Zara top. Problem starts also when comes to buying a gift because there's no way you can match the amount of what they want to buy you, and any kind of decision involving finances when you want to go 50-50. But the holiday which your partner picked are your 5 salaries. A lot of people make it work. I tried 2 times, and each time I felt out of place very quickly. When I was 26, I was making around 20K as a server. I dated a 32-year-old corporate attorney who was making 300K. I think the biggest thing it showed me is that I was capable of more in my life. For a long time I thought I was just going to be a server because that's all I could do. She showed me to want more and to strive for more. I'll always be thankful to her for that because she changed the trajectory of my life. I went back to school and have a different career now. She pushed me to want something different, and it's something I didn't know was possible until I met her. I did. My first boyfriend. His family was wealthy but grew up poor. They were as down home and wonderful as possible. Never forget your roots. I grew up middle class and sometimes really struggled depending on my dad's job status. My wife grew up quite wealthy, think maids, nanny, vacations all over the world, private school. Our biggest hurdle during the first couple years of dating was lifestyle issues. Just seeing how much she'd spend without even worrying about the price or budgeting, not thinking twice about a purchase or when grocery shopping. It was the small things I was more amazed at and found tacky more anything. If you asked her, she would say I have far more financial literacy than her. She's a hard worker and works long hours but still has that safety net. We are happily married, but navigating status class was a huge hurdle in the early stages of our relationship and sometimes still creeps in. Even now during the holidays, it's noticeably different between how my family does things versus hers. My siblings have great jobs, homes, etc., but still does not compare to how elaborate and expensive my wife's family does things. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.